He stood in the lawyer's parking lot with a smug look on his face, like he'd already won, like the papers in his hand were a trophy. What he didn't know was that every single thing he thought he'd hidden, every account, every lie, every name, I already had it, all of it, and I'd had it for weeks. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. It was a Wednesday in late October, and I had lost my mind a little. I'm not talking about a breakdown. I'm talking about the kind of temporary insanity that hits you when you've spent 7 years with someone and you still believe, against all available evidence, that if you just try hard enough, things will turn around. That's what I was doing that Wednesday evening, trying. I started at 4 in the afternoon, pulled out the cast iron skillet Jerome had bought at some farmer's market in our second year together when we still did things like go to farmer's markets. Made his favorite, lamb chops with rosemary and garlic, the kind you have to sear first and then finish in the oven. Roasted potatoes on the side. I had a bottle of Malbec I'd been saving for something, though I couldn't have told you what I'd been saving it for anymore. A celebration, an anniversary, a Tuesday? I opened it and let it breathe. I set the table. Not just plates and silverware, I actually set the table. Cloth napkins I'd ironed once and then stuffed in a drawer. 2 white candles in the holders we got as a wedding gift and had never used. I even moved a stack of design proofs off the table and put them on the counter, which I never do, because my work is always everywhere. I changed out of my work clothes into a blue dress I hadn't worn in about 2 years. I put on earrings, then I waited. 6 o'clock came and went. 7. The potatoes were getting soft. I turned the oven down to warm and tried not to think too hard about what I was doing or why. I poured myself half a glass of the Malbec and sat on the couch with my phone, checking it every few minutes like that would make anything happen faster. At 8:32, I heard his key in the lock. Jerome walked in the way he always walked in those days. Coat still on, bag over one shoulder, that look on his face like just getting home was an inconvenience. He dropped his bag by the door. He was about to head straight toward the back of the apartment, toward the room he slept in that we were still pretending was his home office. When he noticed the table, he stopped. I stood up from the couch and tried to smile. "I made dinner," I said, as if that wasn't obvious. Jerome looked at the table. He looked at the candles. He looked at me in the blue dress with my hair done and my earrings in, standing in the middle of our living room like some kind of fool, and his face did something I had genuinely never seen it do before. It wasn't anger, it wasn't surprise, it was disgust. The way you'd look at something unpleasant that had shown up somewhere it shouldn't be. His lip curled, just slightly. His eyes went flat. "What is this?" he said. Not a question. A statement, like he was pointing at a strange object. "Dinner," I said again. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. He exhaled through his nose, looked back at the table, then at me. "I'm not sleeping with you anymore," he said. "You disgust me. I can't even stand looking at you these days." The room went very quiet. "Deal with it," he added. Then he walked past me, went to the refrigerator, got himself a beer, and disappeared into the back room. I heard the door click shut. A minute later, the low murmur of his TV. I stood there for a long time, long enough that the candles burned down a little on their own, long enough that the wine in my glass went warm. 7 years. 7 years of marriage. 3 years of happiness, maybe 4, and then a long, slow erosion of everything that had made us us. And it ended. The whole thing. All of it. With that. I didn't cry. Not then. I sat down at the beautiful table I had set, and I ate the lamb chops by myself, and I drank the Malbec, and I watched the candles burn. And somewhere in the middle of that meal, something shifted in me. Something cold and clear settled in behind my ribs. I was done. Not angry. Done. There's a difference. Angry is hot and it makes you stupid. Done is quiet and it makes you sharp. I blew out the candles. I put Jerome's plate in the refrigerator. I went to bed. Before I tell you what I did next, you need to understand what I was working with, who we were. Because if I just tell you the end of the story without the beginning, it sounds like I was some kind of ruthless operator from day one. And that's not true. I was a woman who loved her husband. Past tense now, but it was real. Jerome and I met at a friend's birthday party, the kind where you don't actually know half the people there and end up talking to a stranger in the kitchen for 3 hours because the music in the living room is too loud and you're both avoiding someone. He was funny. That was the first thing. Dry and quick without trying too hard. He made a joke about the bowl of chips on the counter that made me actually laugh, not a polite laugh, a real one. And I remember thinking that was rare. We dated for 2 years before we got married. I'm Adriana. I was 34 at the time of the lamb chop incident, freelance brand designer working out of the second bedroom of our apartment in the city. Jerome was 36, senior account director at Parallax Creative Group, a mid-sized marketing firm downtown, the kind of place where everyone wears business casual and talks about client synergy with a straight face. The first 3 years of our marriage were genuinely good. I'm not rewriting history here. We were good together. Sunday mornings at this little diner called Bud's Corner, 4 blocks from our apartment, cracked vinyl booths, a waitress named Dolores who brought us coffee before we ordered because she knew us, a rotating pie case we always meant to try something from and never did. We'd sit there for 2 hours with the newspaper and a shared order of French toast, him doing the crossword, me critiquing his technique. 5 letters, body of water, he'd say. Which direction? Down. Ocean. No, that's 5, but it's too simple. That's why I'm asking you, Adriana. You overthink everything. You underthink everything. That's worse. We went on road trips with no real plan, just picked a direction on a Friday afternoon and drove until we felt like stopping. Jerome had this old playlist on his phone from college, all 90s rock and early 2000s pop that he was deeply embarrassed by but would never delete. I'd catch him mouthing the words to something completely uncool, and he'd pretend he was just clearing his throat. He left sticky notes on my desk, little drawings, stick figures of us doing ridiculous things, fighting dragons, riding dinosaurs, running from a stick figure bear that was labeled, for some reason, Gerald. When a client was making my life impossible over logo colors, I'd find a new sticky note and it would make me laugh in spite of everything. We had a rhythm. I knew when he needed space. He knew when I was stressed before I said a word. It was the kind of knowing that you build slowly over years and take completely for granted until it's gone. And then, somewhere around year 4, it started going. The touch went first. No more casual hand on my back when he passed behind me in the kitchen. No more fingers brushing my arm mid-conversation. Physical affection just quietly packed up and left without saying goodbye. At first I told myself it was the season. We were both busy, the apartment was cold. People get into rhythms where touch feels like effort. I actually Googled it. I found articles about how couples naturally become more comfortable and less physically demonstrative over time. And I read them with the desperation of someone who wants permission to believe a convenient lie. Then the conversation went. He'd stopped listening. Really listening. Somewhere along the way. I'd tell him about a client or a project and he'd say, "That's great," with his eyes on his phone, not even looking up. His thumbs kept scrolling. One time I told him, mid-explanation about a logo project, that I had quit my job and joined the circus. He said, "That's great, babe." I know because I did it twice. Said the circus thing twice, 2 weeks apart, and got the same response both times. He stopped sharing things from his own day, too. We used to decompress together, back in the early years. He'd come home and tell me about some impossible client or some office politics situation, and I'd pour us wine and we'd sit at the counter and work through it together. I liked that. I liked being the person he came to. By year 5, when I asked how his day was, he'd say fine or long, and then disappear to the back of the apartment. 2 words, conversation over. By year 5, he was staying late at the office 3, 4, 5 nights a week, coming home after 9, sometimes after 10. I'd make dinner and leave his portion in the microwave. More often than not, it was still in there in the morning. He'd heated it up, eaten it at the counter, standing up while reading something on his phone, and left the dish in the sink. I started eating alone at the kitchen table and telling myself it was fine because I could watch whatever I wanted on TV. By year 6, he had converted our spare room into his bedroom. He didn't say that's what he was doing. He called it a home office. He brought in a desk, a small TV, a filing cabinet. I even helped him set it up, arrange the furniture so he'd have good light. I told myself he needed the space for work. I bought him a nice desk lamp. I labeled the drawer where he kept his chargers. I made it comfortable for him because I thought making things comfortable for Jerome was love. What I was actually doing was helping him leave without having to admit he was leaving. I knew. Somewhere under all the excuses I was making, I knew. I just wasn't ready to say it out loud. The worst part is I kept blaming myself. I thought I had let the marriage down by not being attentive enough, or present enough, or interesting enough. I started working harder on my business, thinking that being more successful might make me more interesting to him again. I bought new clothes twice in 1 year. I suggested weekend trips, date nights, a cooking class that he agreed to, and then quietly forgot about. Every time something didn't work, I wrote it down internally as my failure and tried something different. That's what 4 years of slow erosion does to a person. It convinces you that the erosion is your fault, until the night of the lamb chops. That night, I was ready to stop being convinced. Let me tell you about that room, because it matters. The spare bedroom had always been kind of a dumping ground. Extra furniture, boxes from our move that we'd never fully unpacked, my overflow design books. When Jerome first proposed converting it, I thought it was a good idea. He said the firm was giving him bigger accounts, and he needed to be able to bring work home properly. Made complete sense. I'm a freelance designer. I understood needing a real workspace. The first piece of furniture that went in was the desk, a big dark walnut thing he found on a resale site and drove across town to pick up. Then a standing lamp. Then a monitor. Then, about 3 months later, a small futon. He said it was for when he worked really late and didn't want to disturb me coming to bed. I believed him. The futon slowly acquired pillows, then a throw blanket, then one of the good pillows from our bed. The firm one, Jerome said, for my back. The bedroom we'd shared for 6 years started to feel like a guest room. I was sleeping in it alone every night, and somehow I had convinced myself this was temporary, a phase, something that would reverse once the big account was finished. It never reversed. What I noticed, and this is embarrassing to admit, is that I started to feel relief when he didn't come to bed. That's how far we had fallen. I was relieved to have the space to myself. No tension, no uncomfortable silence, no lying next to someone who wasn't there even when he was. After the Wednesday night with the lamb chops, I walked past that closed door every morning. I stopped trying to picture what happened in there when I wasn't home. I started thinking about what I needed to do instead. The morning after, I sat at the kitchen table with coffee that I let go, cold. I wasn't crying. I was thinking. I have a habit when I'm working through a design problem. I go very quiet and I make lists in my head. What do I know? What do I need to know? What's the path from here to there? Jerome used to tease me about it. You get this face, he'd say, like you're running calculations. He thought it was funny. He should have paid more attention to it. I sat there and I ran the calculations. What did I know? I knew my marriage was over. I knew Jerome had been checked out for at least 2 years, probably 3. I knew there was almost certainly someone else. I had no proof yet, just the particular quality of his absence. When someone leaves you emotionally before they leave you physically, they've usually gone somewhere. What did I need to know? Everything. Specifically, what our actual financial picture looked like, what assets existed that I might not know about, and who Cora was. Because at that point, I didn't even have a name. I just had a feeling. What was the path from here to there? That was the part I needed to figure out. I want to be clear about something. I was not planning revenge in some elaborate movie sense. I was planning preparation. There's a difference. I had spent 7 years building a life with someone, contributing financially, building a home, making sacrifices for his career. I was not walking away from this marriage with nothing while he walked away clean. That was the line I drew at the kitchen table that morning. So I finished my cold coffee. I opened my laptop, and I started digging. I want to tell you about the paper statement. Here's the thing about Jerome. He was not a careful man. He was a confident man, which is different. Confident people don't think they need to be careful because they don't think they're going to get caught. Jerome paid the credit card bills online, so paper statements didn't come to the house. But he had apparently not updated his billing address when we moved 3 years ago on one account. So a statement, one single paper statement, arrived in our mailbox addressed to him. He would have intercepted it if he'd been getting the mail. Jerome almost never got the mail. I got the mail. I stood in the lobby of our building and opened it. I know, legally complicated, shared household, reasonable expectation, all of that. But I opened it. And what was inside was interesting. This was a card I did not know existed. His name only, not a joint account. The billing history showed charges going back 16 months. Restaurant charges, nice ones. The kind of places Jerome always said were not worth the price. A hotel 2 miles from our apartment. Not a luxury hotel, a regular business hotel, the kind you'd choose specifically because it's unremarkable. And a jewelry store charge from 8 months prior, nearly $400. I don't own anything new from 8 months ago. I took the statement upstairs. I photographed every line with my phone. Then I put it back in the envelope, and I put the envelope in the bottom of my design bag under a stack of proofs, and I went back to work like nothing had happened. I felt sick, and I felt steady at the same time. If that makes sense to you, then you've been where I was. This next part, I genuinely did not see coming. It was about a week after I found the statement. Tuesday evening, around 7. I was on my couch with my laptop trying to work on a logo redesign for a bakery client, and there was a knock at the door. I opened it, and there was Britta Halverson. Britta worked at Parallax, Jerome's firm. I'd met her at maybe 3 company events over the years, holiday parties, a summer thing they'd done at a rooftop bar. We were friendly in the way you're friendly with your spouse's coworkers, polite, pleasant, never exchanged phone numbers. She was standing in my hallway with her coat still buttoned and her expression doing something complicated. "I'm sorry to just show up," she said. "I didn't know if you'd answer if I called." I told her to come in. She sat on the edge of the couch like she wasn't sure she was going to stay long. I offered her tea and she said yes, which told me she was going to stay long. I made 2 cups and sat across from her. "I've been arguing with myself about coming here for a month," she said. "I want you to know that." I waited. "There's a woman," she said. "Her name is Cora Whitfield. She's been involved with Jerome for at least 8 months that I know of. Probably longer. He brings her to work happy hours, introduces her as a friend from his gym. Everyone at the office knows what she is. Nobody said anything because—" She stopped. "Because it wasn't their business," I said. "Right." She looked at her tea. "But she's been showing up at things outside work now. She came to a coworker's birthday dinner last month, and she's been making moves on my manager, Dennis, who is also married, and I'm done watching it." I looked at her. "So you're here for you," I said. "And for me." "Both," she said. "I'm not going to pretend it's purely selfless." I appreciated that more than I can explain. Honesty in a moment like that is a gift. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her coat pocket and set it on my coffee table. It was a printed photo, taken at someone's birthday dinner, phone camera quality, a little blurry. Jerome was in the background laughing at something. And next to him, close enough that their arms were touching, was a woman I didn't recognize. Dark hair, mid-30s, smiling up at him. I looked at it for a long time. "Thank you," I said. Britta nodded. She drank her tea. She asked me how I was doing, not in a pitying way, in a real way, and I told her honestly that I had been better, but I was going to be okay. She left about 20 minutes later. I locked the door behind her and stood in my hallway for a minute with the photograph in my hand. Then I took it to my desk and I added it to the file I had started building. In my work, I have a process for getting a project organized. Doesn't matter how complicated it is. You make a system, you follow the system, you don't let the chaos of it overwhelm you. I applied that to this. I started a physical file in a plastic folder, the kind with the snap closure. In it, I put the credit card statement, organized by date with my annotations in the margin. I put Britta's photo labeled with the date and location she'd given me. I made a timeline on a single sheet of paper, what I knew, when, with sources noted. Then I did something smart, which was to call a divorce attorney named Theodora Wills before I did anything else. I found her through a recommendation from a designer friend who had gone through her own divorce 2 years prior. She had a small firm, just her and 2 associates, but her reviews were the kind where former clients sounded almost grateful rather than just satisfied. I called on a Thursday afternoon and got an appointment for the following Monday. Theodora was 60-something, white-haired, calm in the way that comes from having heard every version of every story 100 times. She did not look shocked by anything I showed her. "What you have here is a start," she said, looking at my folder. "The statement is useful for establishing pattern. The photo is useful for corroborating testimony. What I need to build a real financial picture is documentation of assets, joint accounts, retirement accounts, any business interests he might have." "He's been working late for years," I said. "I don't know all of what's there." "That's why we have subpoenas," she said. "But it's better if you can give me a starting inventory. Pull together what you know and I'll request what you don't." I went home and did exactly that. I gathered 3 years of tax returns that I found in our shared filing drawer. I listed every account I knew about, our joint checking, our joint savings, his workplace retirement fund, which I had beneficiary information for. I listed what I knew about his salary based on his pay stubs from the filing drawer. I brought all of it back to Theodora, and together we built a starting inventory. I felt, for the first time since the Wednesday night with the lamb chops, like I was moving in the right direction. Look, I'm not going to pretend I was cool and competent through this entire thing. I made mistakes. The storage unit thing was a big one. Here's what happened. We had a neighbor in our building, guy named Philip, 3rd floor, retired, one of those people who notices everything and considers it his civic duty to share. I liked him fine. But Philip came up to me in the elevator one afternoon and told me he'd seen Jerome getting out of an Uber near a self-storage place across town twice in the past month, always in the evening, always without his work bag. "Thought you should know," Philip said, very solemn about it. Now, at that point, my imagination was running somewhat hot. I had the credit card statement. I had the photo. I had enough to already know I was right about Jerome, but the idea that he might be hiding physical assets, cash, documents, something tangible, in a storage unit, that felt like a thread I needed to pull. I spent 2 full days on this. I called the storage facility. They wouldn't tell me anything over the phone, which, fair. I went in person and explained I was trying to locate a unit my husband had rented in our shared name. The manager was sympathetic but explained that she couldn't share renter information without authorization. I hired a notary to help me cross-reference public records for any rental agreements that might come up in Jerome's name. This took most of a day and cost me $160. What I eventually pieced together was that the unit was rented to a J. Bertram. Jerome's last name is Bertram. Except, and here's where I wasted another full afternoon, The unit was rented to a Jonathan Bertram, not a Jerome Bertram, and Jonathan Bertram was a 32-year-old supply chain analyst who worked at Jerome's firm and had apparently been using the storage unit to store his ex-wife's furniture while she found a new place. Complete and total dead end. Worse than a dead end, actually. And because in those 2 days of skulking around, I'd been distracted enough, showing up at different times, behaving differently than usual, that Jerome noticed. He didn't say anything, but I caught him watching me twice with this careful expression. And when I came home that second night, his phone was face down on the counter, which was new. His password had also been changed. I tried to glance at it when he unlocked it the next morning and got a new pattern I didn't recognize. I had spooked him, and now he was going to be careful. I went to bed that night furious at myself and forced myself to make a new rule. No more chasing ghosts, only verifiable leads from this point forward. For about 2 weeks after the storage unit disaster, Jerome was different. He started coming home earlier, sometimes by 6:30, which hadn't happened in years. He'd make small talk over dinner. "How's the bakery project going? And did that client ever make up their mind about the logo?" Normal conversational filler, but from Jerome, it felt performative, like he was running a test. I'd answer him in full sentences. I'd ask about his day. He'd give me 2 sentences back. We'd sit at the table together eating takeout, the TV on in the background, 2 people going through the motions of being married. He put his phone in his coat pocket the moment he walked in the door. Not on the counter, not on the coffee table, in his pocket. He'd taken off the pattern lock and switched to a 6-digit PIN, which is harder to casually observe. His laptop stayed closed when I was in the room. One evening, I walked through the living room while he was on his laptop, and the screen went dark in under a second. He had tapped the brightness down fast enough that it looked accidental. It wasn't accidental. I noticed all of it. I noted none of it. I responded by doing the most difficult thing I have ever done in my life, which was to act completely normal, not suspicious normal, the kind where you're clearly trying too hard, where you're too cheerful and too interested, and your smiles are about 4% too wide. Actually normal. I worked on my projects at my desk and wore headphones and occasionally laughed at something on my screen. I watched TV in the evenings with a cup of tea. I ordered takeout from the Thai place down the street on Thursday. Pad see ew, the same thing I always order because consistency is a form of camouflage. I said good morning when he came out of his room and see you later when he left. I did not track his schedule. I did not hover near his phone. I was boring and steady and entirely unthreatening. Inside, I was a completely different story. Inside, I was reviewing what I knew, cataloging what I still needed, and planning next steps. I was thinking about the financial picture. I was thinking about the subpoenas Theodora had mentioned. I was thinking about timing. I was thinking about what it meant that he had gotten careful. Because a careful Jerome was a Jerome who knew he had something to hide. Theodora had told me to give it a few weeks before the next step. Let things settle. Let Jerome think he had imagined the threat. "People get sloppy when they feel safe," she said. "Right now he's tense. A tense Jerome is a watchful Jerome. You want the version of him who's relaxed again." I let him feel safe. I was very, very good at it. The moment came on a Saturday, about 3 weeks later. Jerome was in the shower. He took long showers, always had, and I could gauge by the water sound where he was in his routine. I was in the kitchen making coffee, and his phone was sitting on the counter. He had forgotten to flip it face down. I was not going to touch it. I want to be clear about that. Not because I was above it morally, but because I knew that if he checked and found anything disturbed, app opened, screen brightness changed from being tapped, I would lose whatever advantage I had left, but I didn't have to touch it. Because as I was standing at the coffee maker, waiting for it to finish, the phone buzzed twice and the screen lit up with a preview notification. The name at the top was Cora. The preview showed the first line of her message, and the first line was enough. I won't repeat it word for word here, but I'll tell you it was the kind of message you send someone you are very comfortable with, the kind that assumed intimacy, the kind that referenced something they had done together recently. I turned back to the coffee maker. My hands were steady. I did not react when Jerome came out of the shower. I handed him his coffee. I said I was thinking of going to the farmer's market if he wanted to come. He said he had work to do and went back to his room. I went to my desk and wrote down everything I remembered from the message preview. The name Cora, the phrasing I could recall, anything identifying. Then I called Theodora and left her a voicemail. I now had a name I could verify, a real name. Britta had given me Cora Whitfield and the phone had given me Cora. That was enough. I am going to tell you about the worst afternoon of this whole ordeal, and I want you to appreciate how close I came to losing everything I had built. My documentation file, the snap closure folder with the credit card statement, Britta's photo, my timeline, my notes from Theodora, lived in the bottom drawer of my desk. My desk was in the living room. I worked out there because the light was better. I had put a small luggage lock through the drawer pull. Not a serious lock, just enough to make it take 30 seconds instead of 3. I had a client meeting downtown that Thursday afternoon. It went about 45 minutes longer than I expected. A new branding project, lots of questions, the good kind of meeting. I came home around 5:30, which was later than I'd planned. Jerome was in the living room. He was standing near the window, looking at his phone, which is what he'd have been doing if he just walked in from work. Nothing obviously wrong, but the drawer of my desk was closed in a way that looked slightly different. I know how my own desk looks. I'd been staring at it for a year. And the luggage lock was sitting on top of the desk instead of through the drawer pull. I picked up the lock. I looked at it. I looked at Jerome. "Hey," he said. He didn't look up from his phone. "Hey," I said. I went to the desk and opened the drawer. Empty. I stood there with my hand on the edge of the open drawer and my heart doing something I can only describe as free fall. I checked the drawer below it. I checked the drawer above. I went through the stack of folders on top of the desk. Proofs, client contracts, nothing. I went to the filing cabinet in the corner and checked through every folder. Gone. All of it. Jerome was still by the window, now on a call, speaking in a low voice about something to do with a client deliverable. I walked past him to the kitchen and poured a glass of water and stood at the sink with my back to him and breathed. He thought he had won. That was the thing I needed to hold on to. He thought that by taking my folder, he had neutralized the threat. He thought he had gotten there in time. What he didn't know was that I had already given Theodora copies of everything. What he didn't know was that I had already called my bank and the credit card company. What he didn't know was that the physical copies were not the only copies. But still, that evening was hard. I sat in my bedroom with the door locked and let myself shake for about 10 minutes. Then I called Theodora and told her what had happened. "He took your physical copies," she said. "Yes." "He now knows you're building a case." "Yes." "Good," she said. "That's going to make him nervous. Nervous people make mistakes. And it doesn't matter what he took, Adriana. We're past paper at this point." That phone call with Theodora changed how I was thinking about all of this. She was right. I had been treating the folder as my evidence, when really it was just the beginning of the evidence. The real evidence was in financial records that neither Jerome nor I could destroy. Institutional records, banking histories, account statements going back years. Records that existed in servers and databases that a small luggage lock could not protect. I sat down the next morning and made a new list. First, I called our joint bank and requested 7 years of account history, going back to when Jerome and I had opened the account together in our 2nd year of marriage. I had every right to this as a joint account holder. They put it in the mail. Second, I called the credit card company for the account I had found the statement for. This one took more work. I wasn't listed on this account, and they couldn't give me information directly. But Theodora had already told me that a formal discovery subpoena, once we filed, would pull every statement going back to the account's opening. I made a note of the account number I had from the statement I'd photographed before it was taken. Third, I called Theodora and formally authorized her to begin the divorce filing process. The thing about Jerome taking my folder is that it forced me into the right timeline. If he hadn't spooked and done something stupid, I might have spent another 2 weeks being cautious and gathering more physical evidence. Instead, I was pushed into filing sooner. And filing sooner meant the subpoenas started sooner, which meant the financial picture became official sooner. He thought he was protecting himself. He actually accelerated the whole process. I want you to understand. I was not gleeful about any of this. I was methodical. There is a difference. I had loved Jerome once. I grieved the marriage I thought we were going to have. But grief and action are not mutually exclusive. I could feel both at the same time. I was feeling both at the same time, constantly, all the way through. I just didn't let the grief make me slow. Theodora's office filed the petition on a Tuesday morning in January. She and I had talked through the timing. She had a contact at a process serving company, and we had agreed that the service would happen at Jerome's office rather than at home. I had a reason for that. At home, I would have to be there. I would have to see his face in real time, and I knew myself well enough to know that I did not want that. I needed some distance between me and the moment of impact, not because I was afraid of him, because I was afraid of myself, of what I might say or do or feel if I was standing 5 feet away when he realized it was real. The server went to the Parallax Creative Group offices at 2:15 in the afternoon on a Thursday. He asked for Jerome Bertram at the front desk. Jerome came out to the lobby, probably thinking it was a client or a courier. The server handed him the papers and confirmed his identity and left. I was sitting at my desk working on a typographic system for a restaurant rebrand. My phone was face up. At 2:38, Britta texted me, "It happened. He just came out of the lobby looking like he'd been slapped, went into the small conference room and closed the door. His assistant looked terrified." I read the text. I put my phone face down. I went back to the typographic system. I picked a font pairing, a slab serif for the headers, a clean grotesque for the body. I sent the options over to the client with my notes. Then I sat back in my chair and let myself breathe for about a minute. I called my sister, Naomi. She'd known about all of this since the beginning. She was the first person I'd called after the lamb chop night, and she'd been the one who told me to stop crying and start planning, which is exactly what I needed to hear. I told her the papers had been served. "Good," she said. "Just that." And then we talked for 45 minutes about nothing in particular, and it was the most normal I had felt in months. Jerome came home that night very different from the man who had slept in the back room for the past 2 years. He knocked on my bedroom door, which he hadn't done since I couldn't remember when. I told him to come in. He stood in the doorway in his work clothes, tie loosened, looking about 10 years older than he had that morning. The kind of tired that isn't about sleep. The kind that comes from having something catch up with you all at once. "Can we talk?" he said. I sat up from where I'd been reading. "Sure." He came and sat on the edge of the bed, not beside me, at the foot, carefully, like he was a guest. "I think I've made a lot of mistakes," he said. I waited. "I know things have been bad between us." He looked at his hands. His wedding ring was still on. I hadn't taken mine off yet either. It felt like a detail that wasn't the right time for yet. "I know I haven't been—" He stopped, ran one hand over his face. "I know I checked out." "I know that's not fair to you." "No," I said pleasantly. "It's not. I don't want to lose everything." He looked up. His eyes were doing something uncertain. "I think if we tried counseling, if we actually committed to it, not just going a few times, we could work through this. I've been looking, actually. There's a therapist near my office who does couples work, and he has good reviews. I thought we could—" "Jerome," I said. He stopped. "I've already spoken to an attorney. The filing is in process. That's not going to change." His jaw tightened. A muscle in his cheek moved. "You don't think we should even try?" "I have been trying," I said, "for 4 years. By myself, mostly. Dinner on the table, trying. Suggesting trips, trying. Sitting across from you at that kitchen table asking how your day was and getting 2 words back, trying. You weren't there for any of it." He looked at the floor. "I made dinner in October," I said. "I set the table with candles. I changed into a dress. I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving. I waited for you. Do you remember what you said to me?" He didn't answer, but the way his shoulders moved, he remembered. "I know there's someone else," I said. "I'm not going to fight about it tonight. I'm not here to relitigate the whole marriage at 11 o'clock on a Thursday. I'm telling you where things stand so you can make informed decisions going forward." He looked up. "Who told you?" "It doesn't matter who told me. What matters is what I know and what my attorney is going to do with it." He was quiet for a long moment, picking at the hem of his sleeve, which was something he did when he was thinking hard about what angle to take. "If you wanted to keep some of this private," he started. "Jerome." I kept my voice very even. "I want you to hear me. I don't want to make your life miserable. That is genuinely not my goal. My goal is to walk away from this marriage with what is fairly mine after 7 years. If you cooperate, we can do this cleanly and quickly and move on. If you don't, it takes longer and costs more, and nothing about the outcome changes because I already have the financial records." He stared at me. "Cooperate," I said. "It's the only move that makes sense." He left the room without saying anything else. I heard him in the kitchen for a while, the refrigerator opening, the sound of something being poured. Then the back room door closed. I picked my book back up. My hands were steady. When Theodora called me with the preliminary financial discovery results, I made myself sit down before she started talking. I knew it was going to be complicated. I did not know exactly how complicated. Jerome had been moving money. Over about 26 months, he had been making small, irregular transfers from our joint savings account into a personal savings account in his name only. Not large amounts at once, the kind of amounts that wouldn't trigger an alert or look suspicious on a monthly statement. Between $200 and $600 at a time. But over 26 months, those amounts had accumulated to just under $38,000. $38,000. I sat there with the phone pressed to my ear, listening to Theodora explain this in her calm, factual way, and I thought about all the things I had gone without during those 2 years. A conference I'd wanted to attend for my design business that I'd decided we couldn't afford, new equipment for my studio setup that I'd put off, the weekend trip Naomi and I had talked about that I'd said wasn't a good time financially. Meanwhile, he was building a private account. There was also the second credit card, the one I'd found the statement for, plus what turned out to be 18 months of statements before that one. Theodora had the full picture now, the hotel charges, the restaurant charges, $1,200 at the jewelry store, not $400 as I'd thought. The $400 had just been one charge in a series. "The financial concealment is significant," Theodora told me. "Courts take a dim view of deliberate asset hiding during a marriage. We're going to use this." I asked her what using it looked like in practical terms. "It means we're going to request that the hidden account be included in the marital asset division," she said. "And given the pattern of concealment, we have a strong argument for a disproportionate share." I thanked her. I hung up. Then I went to the kitchen and made tea and stood at the window looking at the street for a while, watching people walk by with their dogs and their strollers and their coffee cups, all of them living their ordinary Thursday lives. $38,000 that he thought he was going to walk away with. I drank my tea. I went back to work. I requested the meeting with Jerome myself, not because I needed to. Legally, everything was moving forward regardless of whether we ever sat in the same room again, but I needed it for myself, not to punish him or to watch him squirm, though I won't pretend I was completely above that. I needed to say what I had to say out loud in front of the person who needed to hear it, and then I needed to be done. We sat at the kitchen table, the same kitchen table where I had once set candles and waited for him to come home. No candles this time, just 2 cups of coffee that we weren't really drinking. I know about the account, I said, the personal savings account, the transfers going back 2.5 years. He opened his mouth. I kept going. I know about the second credit card. I know about the hotel 2 miles from here. I know about Cora Whitfield, and I know you've been seeing her for at least 8 months, probably more. I know about the jewelry purchase. He closed his mouth. My attorney has all of it, I said. The subpoenas pulled everything. There's no version of this where that information disappears. Adriana, I'm not finished. I kept my voice even, not cold, even. There's a difference. Cold is about power. Even is about not falling apart. I want you to understand that I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because you spent 7 years of our marriage slowly making me feel like I was the problem. Like I was too much, or not enough, or somehow responsible for the distance between us. And I believed it for a long time. I thought I was the reason you stopped touching me, stopped talking to me. I thought I had done something wrong. He was looking at the table. I didn't do anything wrong, I said. You made choices, and I absorbed the consequences of them. That ends here. He was quiet for a long time. I'm sorry, he said finally. The way you say it when you mean it, but also know it doesn't fix anything. I know, I said. That's not what I'm here for. What are you here for? To tell you that you have a choice now. You can work with your attorney in good faith, disclose everything, and we settle this in 4 months. Or you can fight it, and it takes a year, and costs you twice as much, and everything still comes out the same way because we already have the records. He looked up at me. And the hidden account goes into the settlement calculation, yes. He nodded slowly, like he was doing the math. Cooperate, I said. It's the only move that makes sense. I picked up my coffee cup. I took a sip. I put it back down. I think that's everything, I said. I'll leave you to think it over. I got up and I left the kitchen. I went to my bedroom. I closed the door. I sat on the edge of my bed and I pressed my hands flat on my knees and I breathed in and out until my chest stopped feeling tight. Then I texted Naomi, "Done." She sent back 3 words. "How do you feel?" I thought about it. "Like myself," I wrote. That was true. Jerome cooperated. I don't know if it was the conversation in the kitchen or just simple math, but within 2 weeks of that night, his attorney reached out to Theodora with a willingness to negotiate. They pushed back on a few things. The size of the hidden account allocation, some of my business asset claims. Jerome's attorney made an argument that my freelance design business, which I had built entirely on my own but using our shared address and shared financial infrastructure, should be considered a partial marital asset. Theodora dealt with that quickly. My client contracts were in my name. My design software licenses were in my name. My professional reputation and portfolio were mine, built on work I had done before, during, and independently throughout the marriage. The infrastructure argument didn't hold. We settled in just under 4 months from the date of filing. I received my share of the marital savings, plus a significant portion of the hidden account. Theodora had pushed for full inclusion, and Jerome's attorney had countered, and they had landed on a number that was, as Theodora put it, fair to the facts. I came out of the marriage with financial stability I had not been sure I would have. I got out of the lease without penalty. Jerome took it over. He signed the final papers on a Friday afternoon at Theodora's office. I was there. Jerome was there. Both attorneys were there. Jerome signed without looking at me. I signed with a good pen that Theodora had left on the table, a heavy one, the kind that means business. Walking out of that office into a February afternoon with cold sunlight and the smell of someone's coffee cart 2 buildings down, I did not feel triumphant. I want to be clear about that because the triumphant ending would be a lie. I felt I replaced He is an orange tabby of spectacular indifference. He does not care about my success or my emotional state. He cares about breakfast and the sunny spot by the window and occasionally knocking things off my desk for reasons known only to him. He is excellent company. My design business has 3 new retainer clients that I landed in the first 2 months after the move. I hired a part-time assistant, a recent graduate named Elena, who is very good and only slightly terrifying in the way that extremely competent young people always are. I have more work than I've had in 3 years, whether that's because I'm freed up or because I'm better rested or because I'm simply not carrying a marriage on my shoulders, probably all 3. I ran into Jerome's college friend, a guy named Patrick, at a coffee shop on a Saturday in April. He got this expression when he saw me, the particular look of a man who knows something he's not sure he should say. I was feeling generous that morning. "Just tell me," I said. "Jerome and Cora broke up," he said, "like 2 weeks after your divorce was finalized." I looked at him. "Huh," I said. I ordered my oat milk latte. Patrick stood there like maybe I was going to say more. I didn't. We exchanged the kind of pleasantries you exchange with someone you'll probably never see again, and I went home. I walked into my apartment, my space, my rules, my quiet. Biscuit was on the kitchen counter, which he knows he's not allowed on. He looked at me like he was daring me to say something about it. I didn't. I put my latte down, scratched behind his ears, and went to my desk. I had a logo revision to finish, a new client brief to read through, a business I had built, a life that was mine, and a very opinionated orange cat judging my color choices. Jerome made his decision a long time ago when he decided I wasn't worth seeing. I made mine that Wednesday night at the kitchen table with the candles burned low and the lamb chops going cold. He thought I was dealing with it. He had no idea how right he was. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.